session. So if we can get Rindy, Chris, and Michele up here with me, we'll get started. Look at that.
So, Rindy, to get onto the stage, if you just hit your F key on your keyboard and point it at the stage, you'll teleport up onto the stage. There you go.
Everybody, oh, there we all are. All right. Okay, so again, I am Tom McCaffrey. I'm the president and CEO of Supply Chain Canada. And with me today, we have three guests. We have Rindy Bristol, the senior director. She's a senior director with Whole Leaf. We have Chris Shaver, who's a senior director, vertical market activation with Dematic. And we also have Michele Evans, who is the assistant deputy minister, the Ministry of Jobs, Economy and Innovation at the Government of Alberta. So thank you to the panelists for coming today. And we're just going to have a conversation here. So I'll kind of open it up with a question for Michele. So Michele, can you give us a bit of a sense if, technology adoption is a focus area for the Alberta government?
Yeah, super fantastic way to start, Tom. I think the thing that is really important for people to know is that Alberta's going through a lot of change and transformation right now. And so one of the things that we've been focusing on, we've got a new ministry name, Jobs, Economy and Innovation, and I think the innovation is key to that. Technology is a real play. The world is changing around us, and it's just really critical that our supply chain, our businesses, people think about how we can use and adopt the technology that's available. So in fact, just today, the government announced its innovation and growth strategy, which is really starting to lay out the areas of focus and things that government's interested in terms of driving technology and technology adoption. So yes, is the very short answer of a real key focus area for us going forward.
Hello? Oh, there we go. Sorry, everybody. I was muted. I couldn't find a way to unmute myself there. Apologies for that. So thanks, Michele. So, Chris, question for you. So, obviously from a high level, we know in the given time, technology is important to all companies, and it's a challenge that they have to try to find the right technologies for their situation. That's a challenge and a barrier to overcome. And there's supports from government and other ways to help companies, overcome some of these barriers. But from your perspective, what new customer behaviors are you experiencing or seeing that contribute to the need for something like automation, for instance?
No. Yeah, Tom, I think you were alluding to it there just a second ago, but we're in such an interesting time with COVID and what's happening from a consumer, in terms of consumer behaviors and how we're all changing the way that we interact with the world, whether that's how we, consume our education, our kids' education, whether that's how we our buying habits, things like that. But it's so unique and so different, and what's great for technology companies is disruption gives us an opportunity to find new ways of whether it's doing business, doing life, doing work, whatever that might be, right? So, the big ones I think are the obvious ones. We talk a lot about the digital space and the e-commerce space and what's happening from a consumer buying habits and shopping habits perspective, and I think that opens up a lot of opportunities for for new technology, new automation, new solutions. At least for us at Dematic, we're seeing a major push. Gosh, you think about the grocery space and how we're all, finding different ways to obtain our groceries, right? It's a new way of potentially buying, for those of us who might not be going to the store anymore. There are new ways for fulfillment. When we think about how do we get our grocery goods these days. So, I think a lot of it is just, this shift towards digital, and we all saw that this growth in e-commerce and digital was coming, but COVID has just exponentially accelerated that. And a lot of the market data that we're seeing is saying that the majority of people will continue to use these new shopping behaviors that they've adopted during COVID. So I don't think there's going to be a major shift back towards kind of brick and mortar shopping and that kind of experience. I think the growth into the digital space is going to continue going forward. And I know from a Dematic perspective, that's where we're working to position ourselves as well. So hopefully that helps, Tom. Tom, can you still hear us, or tell you what, can the rest of the audience still hear us? Yep, we have claps, so I assume that we can. So let me do this in the meantime while Tom's working on his audio. I'll pick things up from an MC perspective. So Rindy, one question for you. What areas have you seen automation to be the most beneficial? Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is a great question to segue into what Chris was talking about and the digital space that we're now in with shopping for groceries. Us being a producer and grower of a produce item and an item that is perishable and has a short shelf life compared to some of the other CPG items that we purchase as consumers. It's important with the space. And so what we have to do as a business is we have to pivot and move towards automating the functions in our business that are most important, that keep us in the game. And when Whole Leaf was built, and when we started tossing around this idea 5 years ago, and if it would be possible to bring this vision to life, automation was a huge component to getting this off the ground and being able to introduce a product to the market that was economical. We went in with the mindset that consumers had a limit in terms of price elasticity on what they were going to pay for a product, and without automating certain features and functions of our business, we would have never been able to launch the product like we did and kind of witness some of the successes that we had. We still have a long way to go, but without the automation, we looked at what the industry had done in the past and what some of the vertical greenhouses were doing, and we decided to pivot off that and see what we could do to make it better, to ensure that the product that we delivered to the market was economical and the price elasticity was in line for our consumers.
You know, and I'll just chime in real quick. I think with when you're talking about just technology in general, whether all right, audio's back. Sorry about that. So I promise we'll figure out the muting here in just a minute. So, Rindy, I loved your answer. You talked just briefly about, I think with any technology or automation is being able to pivot quickly, and for you to be able to do that, I think I talked a little bit about disruption, and pivoting is critical during disruption, right? So I love that you talked about that. Michele, question back for you. Can you share what things your branch or the government at large is doing to help the economy recover from COVID and prepare for a possible second wave? Are there any ways to ensure that we're all properly prepared?
Yeah, thanks.
I think we've lost Michele's audio too here.
Can you hear me
Rindy,
now?
can I come back to you? Is your audio working?
I believe so.
All right, let's give it a shot. Talk about how automation affects the workforce from your perspective.
You know, excuse me, that's a great question. And I love this question for the fact that our operation really thrives on automation working in tandem and symbiotically with our workforce. So we didn't bring, automation in to replace our workforce. We brought automation in to enhance our workforce. And an example of that is all of our sowing, as well as our germination, propagation, and transplantation at the greenhouse is all automated. But what we offer to our workforce is an opportunity to grow within their roles. So, for example, you can start out at the harvest line, and our harvest line is one thing that we didn't automate because there's no better set QA standard or anything that we've been able to find in terms of managing QA and quality assurance and quality control for high quality product than a pair of human eyes, as well as human hands. And so they're still subjective enough, which we haven't got to AI point where we believe that AI can be better than a human on the QA side. But what we offer is that you can start on the harvest line, And we can get you to a point where if you want to continue in your career with us, we can get you into a robot operator position where you're actually running one of our 4 robots that we have in transplantation, or you can move into the sewing area, you can move into the germination room. All of these things that require automation, they also need to be maintained, and we need smart, intuitive people running those machines, or being attached and complementing what the automation brings to our business. So for sure, it's not a detriment to our workforce. It's an absolute complement to our workforce is what automation is bringing to our business.
Awesome.
And maybe,
Thanks,
can
Randy.
you hear
That's
me
cool.
now?
Yeah, is that Michele?
It is. Yay.
We can. Verizon said that, yes, we can hear you now. So
We can hear me now. You can hear me now. Sweet.
Michele, we'll go back and ask you that question. Real quick, Randy, as you describe your operation, I really want to come travel and see that operation now. It sounds really neat. So Michele, the question for you that we had from earlier, can you talk about what things your branch or the government at large is doing to help the community recover from COVID and prepare for a possible second wave? And are there ways that we can ensure that we are prepared?
Yeah, so great question. And I'll just build a little bit on some of the stuff that Randy had said as well. I think it's really neat to see the automation and being thought through around talent. And so some of the things we're thinking about in terms of recovery from COVID, there's sort of the short-term recovery, but also the long-term recovery. And so we're thinking a little bit through, in the short term, how do we support our small and medium businesses that have been significantly affected by COVID? We're, watching and helping them access the supports and programming they need, helping them pivot. Again, some really great stories around tech adoption as a result of e-commerce and other things. But the automation and trying to help people have the skills, the talent to be able to adopt some of the technology. And by way of preparation, again, I think just trying to understand what market dynamics are happening, trying to help people understand the best guidance, how it applies to their businesses, trying to make sure that we're thinking through both short-term and long-term recovery. We've got a long road ahead of us in terms of economic recovery. We've been hit both by COVID, but also downturns in oil and gas, and that flows through the whole economy. So it's about accelerating our adoption and transfer of things like automation, things like using technology in different ways to make us more productive.
That's great. Thanks, Michele. And before I keep going on questions, Tom, is your audio up and running? Nope. Okay. I'll continue. I'll continue going. One question that came in, and I'll start with this one, and anybody else can chime in, Michele or Randy. What markets do you see needing automation immediately due to the results or the impact of COVID? There's a few that come to mind. We talked about it earlier, the grocery and the food and beverage space. Grocery, for a couple of reasons. First of all, is just the shifting dynamic away from people shopping in brick and mortar grocery stores and that trend towards online shopping. And I think in North America, we had, just to give you a sense of the shift, about 98% of all grocery was purchased in stores prior to COVID. And there was a thought that, maybe that would get to 97% by the end of 2020. It's probably going to be, let's say if it's 97 by the end of 2020, bought in store, that means 3% was bought through e-commerce or online channels, right? It appears that we're going to be closer to 10% of total groceries going to be bought through digital channels by the end of 2020. And most grocers hadn't planned on that kind of digital growth until 2023 or 2025. So you're talking about a major advancement in terms of the way we're shopping in the grocery space, and kind of the opportunity for automation there. The other piece that comes into play there is related to track and trace. And again, not that, there's so many bad things with COVID, right? But, one of the positives is generally it's not transferred on, products or hard surfaces necessarily. Well, at least that's what I've been told. I'm not a doctor, right? So, but understanding where your food is coming from, who's touched it, what are the different points along the supply chain and the different supply chain nodes that your food or your product has gone through. How do we create visibility to where that food is, the whole farm to table type mentality, right? So there's some major opportunities for automation in the grocery space. The other one that is continuing to be disrupted is in the retail space, so general merchandise and apparel. And for so long, you have organizations like Amazon who have pushed the envelope here, right? And they've always, at least for their Prime members, have pushed for 2-day shipping. And what's interesting is, at least in the States, right, you have Target and Walmart, which are these two big behemoths. And the difference between them and Amazon is that Target and Walmart have thousands of stores. And now all of a sudden they're using these stores as fulfillment nodes and fulfillment points to offer same-day delivery to many of their customers. Amazon can't do that today. So there was just an announcement, I think it was 2 days ago. Amazon came out and said they were investing in 1,000 warehouses. And again, this was U.S. based, but you can imagine that they're going to be doing that elsewhere as well. So the speed with which we as consumers want to get that product that's ordered online, there was always an expectation that it was, originally 5 days. We were all okay with that. Then the expectation was 2 days, and now the expectation is a few hours. And so I think there's going to be an opportunity for automation to continue to speed up that processing time. I call it order dwell time, how long it takes to get from click to deliver, and get that down to a few hours. So a couple of spaces, a couple of markets where I think we're going to see automation really pick up here in the near term.
Yeah, and I would agree with you on that. I think the other place where you'll see a lot more automation, even is emerging in through the trucking logistics industry, where we're seeing more and more things being automated behind the scenes. So like you said, you talk about e-commerce and some of those processes around delivery being automated. I'm not necessarily thinking we're going to see automated trucks and other things in the short term, but the processes by which you do some of these things will certainly become more and more automated, so that again the whole supply chain becomes more efficient that way.
Sure, right. It's funny. You think even a few years ago, and you think about flying robots and drones dropping things off, and all of a sudden here they are, right? It's funny to see. So, Rindy, question for you: how does thinking about the workforce? It's such an interesting conversation that we've had with COVID recently, and is it safe to work and be around people or not? But just talking about automation specifically, and what are the impacts that automation has on the workforce? How does that affect the workforce?
I think directly right at the greenhouse, automation, as I mentioned earlier, has been a complement. But as we move our product beyond the four walls of the greenhouse, you definitely hit on, the major change and shift in grocery and how we purchase and get our groceries delivered. And where is the automation and last mile delivery? How do we get that item down the block or down the street within a matter of hours from that, place order click, right? And so we've been experimenting with that in other parts of our business. We have in Calgary, in Saskatoon, and Vancouver, we have a delivery system called Inspired Go. And that's essentially, it's an app-based program where you can order a salad at 10 o'clock and it'll be delivered to your office building at noon in time for your lunch. Unfortunately, COVID kind of put a wrench into those plans because everybody ended up going home. And so we pivoted again and decided to do home delivery. So now you could actually build a box of salads as you're working at home, and that'll be delivered right for your door. But how do we get last mile delivery to be economical? People don't want to pay for shipping. I believe that the customer kind of sees shipping as, one of those added on costs. They want to know the final delivered cost of their goods. And as you mentioned, it's that farm to table movement as well. And there are these ghost kitchens popping up in warehouses, or these general commissaries that are working out of a kind of a warehouse kitchen where you can get just about anything under the sun, any type of cuisine, under the sun. And it's in this ghost kitchen that is unmarked building, but yet they're kind of pumping out all types of meals that you would recognize as you would drive down like a main street in your city and whatnot. And so it's quite interesting how automation is even affecting us at the greenhouse, because we have to learn to live in that space. And when you're dealing with a perishable product, anybody that's in the dairy industry, or the protein industry with meat, the poultry industry or the cattle industry, they totally understand where the realm that we live in the produce industry, which is you have a perishable product, and as soon as that product is picked or that product is processed, the clock is ticking and it needs to end up in the consumer's hands. So we need, and we continue to need, an intelligent workforce that complements our automation. We have a fresh cut facility in Calgary as well. And that automation, again, we need people to be making sure that the inputs go into the processing facility, but then we rely on the machines to make sure that the consistency of that product remains constant. So again, we can automate just about anything under the sun, but we need to have great operators, and we need to have intellectual knowledge being passed down through the management cycle of the business in order to remain relevant.
It's and I'll chime in real quick on that. I love where you're going with that too. There's always this concern about automation, and is that going to displace the workforce? And I actually see it very differently. I think where automation can come in and take some of the these repeatable processes that can be automated. It's a great opportunity to take some of those human resources and dedicate them to tasks that are going to really differentiate your organization from somebody else. Whether that's creating a unique or a different experience, or something that's a higher value add. I almost see it as a way. It's an investment, not just to save money, but to find other areas of your organization to more deeply invest. So. Question probably for the broader panel. This is an interesting one given what we've been going through for the last 6 or 7 months. How do we make the investment today into automation with so many unknowns tomorrow? I don't know, Michele or Rindy, do one of you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I can start with that one, because we've been trying to live in a space for the last 5 years of looking to see where our industry is going to go in the next 5 years. And for those of you who don't know much about Whole Leaf and the business and the facility that we have just east of Coaldale in Lethbridge County, it's one of a kind. It's state of the art. It's the only one like it in the world. And we have we have lighting companies, we have, biological companies, we have breeders, seed breeders that are clamoring to get inside our facility because they know that the type of automation and technology and the level that we've gone to with this facility. So essentially, it's interesting, and we're working on some other projects and where we can take Whole Leaf 1.0 and where can we go to Whole Leaf 2.0 and where can we put other greenhouses, because there is a there is a water factor, and there is some external environmental issues that are happening in our world, especially with COVID, that were made apparent more in COVID, that we need to tackle. So right now, if you're unfamiliar, there's wildfires burning in California, and what's happening is there is ash and soot falling on the lettuce fields. And so if you're at the store and you're buying lettuce from California, you may notice that there's a whole bunch of ash and soot in it. And one thing that our greenhouse can do is we can provide a local product. We are that farm to table where we are transparent. You send us an email as a consumer and you're probably going to get me on the other line, right? And so we are being transparent. And, we're really wanting to move forward and say, like, hey, we can offer a great experience for our consumers, and we're doing that right here in Alberta. So it doesn't have to be in Silicon Valley. It doesn't have to be over in Europe. It can happen right here in our own backyards. So, I'm looking forward to see how we can, get AI better working in our greenhouse. We have an opportunity to get drones that fly throughout the greenhouse, and they will go in and they will pluck plants that aren't viable, that won't make it to harvest. Imagine if we could get a bump on production of, 15 to 18% just by plucking out the plants that aren't viable because they didn't germinate or they didn't propagate or they have a double heart or they have some other kind of defect. Imagine if we can pluck that plant and replace it with a viable plant so that when we go to produce and to harvest those plants, we're not having any holes in our harvest. We're harvesting 100% of the time. Imagine what that does to the economies of scale and what we're able to do.
Good. Michele, I don't know if you had any thoughts on that question in terms of, how to make the investment today with so many unknowns for tomorrow.
Listen, it's like any kind of investment. If you are not making the investments today, I mean, we all see the acceleration of the technology development, adoption, deployment. The world is, as sort of Rindy has said, is just totally accelerating, and the potential and the opportunity is huge. So I mean, I think the return on investment is one that's always, businesses I appreciate struggle with, but if you're not adopting and not investing in these technologies, you'll certainly be left behind. So one of the things is how do you help, we're trying to think through how do we help businesses and others think through that ROI and create those opportunities. The pace of growth and technology adoption and change is just so incredibly fast. You just need to recognize if you're not making those investments, you're falling behind, and someone will.
I also think that you don't need to reinvent the wheel either, right? I think you learn from other mistakes. Our greenhouse was built on a premise of taking proven greenhouse technologies like LED lighting, like an NFT system, like, a gutter system. And actually what the unique part of the greenhouse is having all of these technologies symbiotically working together for great quality and high production. So Michele, as you said, you kind of have to invest, but you also don't need to reinvent the wheel. Look at what someone else in a similar industry has done and where have they made a mistake, and then learn to move forward and better the existing technology. It's not all about everything being brand new all the time. It's bettering what is currently out there as well.
Yeah, and just to recognize it's such a global marketplace, and it's so easy to make those connections. Like you said, like the fires in California impact your business today.
Yep.
Hey, Rindy, it's interesting as you describe the kind of the ecosystem that you described for whole leaf. It's almost like you've taken standard Lego blocks and that anybody can get a hold of, but you've put them together in a different and unique way. Is that fair to say?
You've nailed it. It's exactly what it is we have taken the Lego blocks and we have put them together, and that's in a way that most people couldn't figure out. I mean, and that was the benefit of having intellectual knowledge. We had growers that we had 2 growers working on this that had over 90 years experience in growing. And we had one that was really heavily based on the scientific side. And then we had another one that was really heavily based on the genetic side and the biology side of things. And so what they did working collaboratively together was to actually put these Lego pieces together so that they would work in tandem for the greater good of the product and for the increased quality of the product. I would, it's going to be bold to say, but I would rival any grower in North America to have a product, as high a quality and in terms of density and consistency as what we're able to produce at Whole Leaf because of the inputs and the technology that we've put in. We've just recently installed a water chiller. And the water chiller helps us manage our water temperature. It's one thing that most greenhouses, they just bring water in from their holding ponds. And if it's really hot outside, you know what, they're dealing with water that's 24, 25 degrees Celsius. Well, now we've installed new automation that will absolutely not deploy any water to the plants unless it's at 18 degrees Celsius, which the plants can thrive and grow because lettuce is a cold weather crop. So it's those things that these things have been around, but it's figuring out how to place it within, in the realm and make it all work together.
That's really interesting. So many variables and factors to deal with in your business, Randy. The only other maybe just a couple of other points on how to make the automation investment with so many unknowns tomorrow. Part of it is just understanding what are some of the different, and this is whether you're doing automation or just general business planning, but is spending some time and thinking about what are the different scenarios that could happen. And it's a little bit of a scary thing to go through and think about all of these wild things that could happen, but then associating both a risk level and a risk probability to those to figure out, which of those scenarios should I be building into my automation plans versus not. The other thing that I'll mention is, and I have to be cautious about using this, but there's a phrase that I love to use with my team is minimum viable product. I call it MVP. And we think about technology or automation, right? So often when we install technology, something that's new, creative, innovative, we need to get it out there and understand and see how people or users or individuals react to it. And then from there, pivot and make changes and adjust as needed. And so I think my thought from a technology and an automation perspective is don't spend 12 months trying to pull together the perfect set of requirements where you've thought everything through. Take your time on the requirements and spend the right time up front. But the reason I say don't take, for example, 12 months or even longer is by the time you've worked through those requirements for that 12-month period, the requirements you started on 12 months ago are probably no longer valid, and you're going to be building new requirements again. And so there's speed associated with the implementation of technology and automation that needs to happen, knowing that there needs to be a read and react and a learn and a pivot after we install these kinds of things. So
fail fast, right? Fail fast and get back up and figure out what is left over from your fail that's usable and viable for sure. I 100% agree with that. And we're working on that to bring new products to market within a 90-day timeline because things just change so fast these days. So I completely agree. Fail fast and pick yourself back up and get back going and figure out what pieces of the fail you can take forward to the next success.
Yeah, really
I
being
love
agile. Yeah, agile development. Love it.
I love the fail fast phrase. Let me see what else, other questions we have out here. I don't know, let's see here, whether it's Tom or Aaron or Tyler, are there any questions from the audience? Can we get those or not? Is there a way to have people write those in? Or Tom or Aaron, were there any other questions that you all had that we can help answer? And if you can't speak, maybe you can chat them to me and I can I can relay them.
Chris, I think that'd be a great way to have questions from the audience. If you just want to chat them in, that's probably the easiest way to do it. So just hover over Chris or myself or Tom and go ahead and type those questions, and then we'll forward them onto the panel.
Taking a selfie.
Let's see here. Here's a question. This one's probably going to be for Michele. As government funding programs shift in response to the pandemic, are there any programs that you know of that could help businesses?
So if you haven't signed up for the small and medium enterprise grant, that's one of the smaller grants that we have, $5,000 for any business that has been disrupted by COVID, had a 50% reduction in revenue in monthly revenue from the prior year. They're all eligible for those grants. We've got programs through the federal government and otherwise. I mean, I think there is no end of supports to try to get businesses through. And I think, one of the things that's important too is share your ideas and with us on areas where we need to be supporting. We've got a minister who's interested in understanding what further supports. But those are from a small business, from a business perspective, I would point to those ones first.
Good. And you got a round of applause too. That's
Yay!
great. Any other questions that the audience can think of? If you have any, feel free to point them at me. I'm clapping my hands here, and I can relay them on. Let's see here. Here's one, actually. Natalie, it's a great one. I was actually going to ask this one myself. What are the change management aspects with automation? I'll start with this one, and then I'll let others chime in. When you think about automation and really changing any type of process, people are going to go through the normal change curve, right? It's going to be shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, right? And so making sure that, with any technology or automation, that you have a pretty solid handle on the change management strategy associated with that, right? How do you work people through understanding what the change is and really the why? Why are we doing the change? What's in it for me? I think of the WIFM, what's in it for me? Making sure that we're giving them the knowledge and the skills and the ability to handle that change in technology and automation. And then ultimately, how do you reinforce that change as well, right? So there's got to be some forethought into what the impact is going to be on the user, and just be cognizant that it's any given change when you put in automation. Many times it's in the workplace, right? And for so many of us, work is such a big part of our lives. And so sorry about that. I think I got muted there for a second. So yeah, just making sure we have a solid change management strategy or plan in place. So another question came in. Rindy, I'll pose this one to you. Is there anything businesses need to know about building requirements when considering automation?
Wow, that's a great question. I think businesses need to understand what the ROI will be for them on the purchase, or going further into the automation, and why are they automating this business. I think you nailed it with the change automation piece, where it's like, what's the why, what's the WIFM, and how can we make things better? And then you have to really understand what your investment is going to be, and how long does it take for that investment to come back to you tenfold. So an example that we had of this was we were required at our processing facility in Calgary, where we do value-added salads, washed and ready-to-eat salads, and we had these really cumbersome labels that went on every case. And when I looked into it a little bit more, it was looking like it was a grandfathered process that had come from a previous facility that we had taken over. And so I started digging in with our process management team, and we figured out that, replacing and automating those labels that were going on the cases, and the person that we had to pay to stick those labels on the cases, would save us about $22,000 a month, and the investment cost was $2,500. So essentially, we had those printers paid off within 6 weeks of them being implemented into our operation. And so we did that homework before we even sent out a PO to get these printers in. But it's all about, your people understanding the why, and then it's understanding what that return on investment is for your business. If it's something, if it's a really large outlay of capital and cash, but you can get that return on investment within a certain timeline that is reasonable for the revenue that your business is bringing in, then you make that decision with your team for sure. But that was just one example of something that we've done, and how we look at things in terms of bringing automation into our facility.
Awesome, great, thanks, Rindy. Any other questions before we? Let's see here. Question is, where do we believe automation is being underutilized? That is a good question. Where is automation being underutilized?
So, I'll jump in. I think one of the areas, like if you could think about it, automation being underutilized is anywhere we see sort of low levels of productivity. And so writ large, when we look at automation from a government perspective, we sort of see lower levels of productivity in our manufacturing sector. And that's everything. That's a pretty big definition of underutilization. But, anything from the kinds of things Rindy's been talking about in terms of our food and our value-added agriculture through to our energy pipelines, and some of the automation there. So, I think there's lots of places where we have a lot of catching up to do in automation, and manufacturing writ large is one of those areas.
Great. Thanks, Michele. Any other questions before we open it back up to just some more networking and a chance to revisit some of the exhibition spaces? Anything else the group can think of? Sounds good. So let's see here. Tyler, do you want to wrap things up? Is that okay?
Yeah, Chris, thanks. I'm just gonna, there we go. Chris and Michele and Rindy and Tom, thanks so much for, what's been just a really interesting panel and a really interesting look at the innovations that are becoming possible through automation technology, and not just through the technology, but also by looking at these challenges in a different way and really, reframing the challenge.
Oh, we lost Tyler. Now he's back. There he is.
Yes, technology is fascinating, and we're learning that today. So I was just saying, thanks for giving us a different way to look at challenges and having a different mindset, and that I think has been really an invaluable part of today's session. So the space is going to stay open. Please take the time to network and join those demo spaces and see the technology that Dematic has to offer for automation, and to support business growth and these things that have been talked about today. I will just remind you that if for some reason you can't get back into the main space, please just rejoin the event. It'll stay open until 3 o'clock. And what I'd like to do is just have everybody join me in a big round of applause for our panel, for being here and for the excellent information that they've shared with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. It was fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.